Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from all over the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 112, featuring LeViness with Push Protocol, which claims to be the communications protocol for Web3. And Ian is leading their DAO initiative. Thank you for joining us, Ian. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, I'm here for all things push and all things DAO.
There we go. Well, I've been involved in a couple DAOs myself, and you know, some have kind of fallen by the wayside. A couple others are kind of still active and going, and so I definitely want to have a bit of a conversation about that. And really grateful for you offering to join us here, and I'm really interested in learning a bit more about push protocol, because frankly, the idea of push notifications on the blockchain had never really occurred to me, or the idea of kind of requiring this communication layer between blockchains for the purposes of kind of notifying the users had not really occurred to me in that sense. So with that, that's going to be the topic of the episode today. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for joining us. We're really going to be looking at the concept of push notifications for one on the blockchain, as well as DAOs, which for those who do not know in the audience, that is your decentralized autonomous organizations, which were a very interesting, innovative concept that really came out of the explosion of NFTs and Web3 and programmable smart contracts, and the idea that, you know, instead of your typical kind of corporate structure, CEO, centralized leadership, you can actually break it down to have votes on chain and have governance on chain and have a little bit more of a flat structure. But in actuality, a lot of the times you end up still requiring some kind of executive board, some kind of centralized body to help push things forward. So that's a bit of the conversation we're going to have today with Ian, you know, how that balancing act kind of works and how we see things evolving, really. And then lastly, really, when we talk about kind of Web3 and the concept of quote unquote mass adoption, which is a bit of a misnomer, you know, there's a lot of concern or really curiosity about what that's actually going to look like in practicality. You know, how ubiquitous are decentralized wallets going to be, and how are they going to interact with our data? And when it comes to notifications, like, do we want to think about notifications in the context of our smartphones, which we know very much rely on data and all kinds of things that we may or may not be comfortable with them taking? And so when we look in Web3 and we look at blockchain, we're thinking about a new kind of concept around data, the idea that there's going to be more data ownership, that there's going to be less kind of data vampires, as we say, people that are just, or entities that really profit from your data in the background without you really understanding or knowing how they're using that data. So that's the hope, is that Web3 is going to bring in some more data sovereignty, some more ownership, and some more understanding. So as always, we are also hanging out in the metaverse. You can check out our gamer room with our NFT collection at web3warriors.io, and we always pushing the conversation into the digital world. I want to thank any guests that join us and on the live stream on Twitch, and we'll have the episode up on all the podcast networks by Sunday, November 10th. So with that, I want to turn things over to Ian and Push Protocol. Maybe before we jump into, you know, everything that Push is working on, I would love to hear a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you to Web3, what brought you to blockchain, and everything you're working on. So thanks again for joining, Ian. Can you share a little bit about your background before we dive into Push Protocol?
Yeah, of course. Happy to. Thank you so much for having me here again. I'm Ian. Like you said so well, I'm the Taoist or something like that, however you want to say it, at Push. But to go back a bit for a second here, how did I get here? Why do I care about crypto? What's my story? I've been in this space for 8 concurrent years so far. My first touch point in the crypto space was walking into a provincial library where I was living in the Czech Republic, just not looking for anything crypto, just looking for an English book to read. There was a small English section, not even that many choices, just seeing if they had something new. It was a Saturday in the fall of 2016. Walked in with my girlfriend. I remember looking down near the bottom of the shelf, and there was this book called Digital Gold, which some of you may know is by Nathaniel Popper, who was a New York Times journalist at the time, and I believe he still is. And it was one of the first seminal works about Bitcoin, popularizing the story of Bitcoin, the first 3 or so years of what happened, who Satoshi Nakamoto was, at least some ideas about it, not trying to speculate on his actual identity, but
Of course.
it may have been a collective of cypherpunks and stuff like that. But more importantly, that book was the book that explained to me for the first time what Bitcoin was. I read it in 24 hours. And then I went to the Bitcoin white paper, and the rest is kind of history, in the sense that a couple months later, near the start of 2017, I was all in on crypto Twitter. And it was so early back then that the only real groups were a small group of Ethereum people or something like that, the Bitcoin fam and the Litecoin fam. And actually, the Litecoin fam were the first people to take me in and teach me even more about all things crypto. Shout outs to Johnny Litecoin Pirate, and a bunch of the guys over there who are still around today.
Nice.
They were just super helpful people. From there, I'll pause in a second to see if you have any thoughts so far, but from there, I started writing blogs about all my thoughts on crypto. It wasn't really anything at the time. I was a newbie. I was just kind of sharing my thoughts. Then I got a request to write for a recruiting company's blog on some basic thing like what is Bitcoin and why does it matter? And that snowballed into regular freelance crypto writing, which led to my first full-time crypto job at Bitpanda, which is now like a multi-billion-dollar crypto exchange conglomerate of sorts.
Wow.
So that's only the beginning. But I love telling that to people because it illustrates. I was just an English teacher, by the way, at the time. You can be anything and then succeed in crypto.
That's amazing. So you're not teaching English anymore and just fully full-time in Web3 and crypto? Is that the story, or been converted? Or are you still doing some education?
That's the story.
Yeah.
I'm full-time in crypto, but I won't say I don't want to teach. I've thought about it recently, especially because it still fulfills me.
Mm-hmm.
What drives me even now in crypto is helping people above all else. That's why I'm still here, helping people understand the technology, helping people DAO, all kinds of things we can talk about as we go. But that equates to my teaching too. The more I've been in crypto, the more I think about teaching again, just because it really makes me feel good and fulfills me to help people learn English. So I'll probably end up doing a bit of that again, but I'm also very much full-time in crypto. Feels like forever now, having been full-time only crypto since 2017 and
Amazing.
in crypto since 2016.
Amazing. And I believe you mentioned you're joining us from Virginia, but you've been back in stateside for about 2 years, and you were in Czech Republic for a long time. I'm just curious, looking at the global impact, and I love your story, by the way. I love that it's just so genuine, just randomly in a library, and, the book on digital gold gets you hooked, and you go down the rabbit hole, and you're still there 8 years later. So that's really cool. I'm curious what the experience was like in that change from, Czech Republic and maybe the way that people are viewing or using crypto out there compared to, coming back to Virginia and being stateside and seeing how this is all kind of unfolding. Obviously, big election this week, and now crypto people are doing what they're doing. The market is getting crazy. But how does it kind of change when, going from Europe and Eastern Europe especially, and then, landing in Virginia? I'm just curious about that kind of your experiences there.
It's a great question. Biggest difference to kick things off in that respect is when I was in the Czech Republic, it felt a lot more natural to be in crypto. There's a vibrant hacker culture there, a really vibrant community of just all these picking yourself up off of your bootstraps types of people, even more so than certain parts of America. And I really enjoyed that aspect of living in Czech, and just also, of course, not really having to worry about regulatory opinion on crypto, because they kind of had like a general framework and they didn't just like attack people with enforcement actions or something. Okay. This is not me trying to get the regulators after me, but nobody wants to have an enforcement action when they're just trying to do something good for the world.
100%.
But being back to the second part of your question, being back in America and with the election and all that, I'm bullish on certain aspects, of course. I'm bullish on, I think the regulatory opinions are now going in a much better direction in America. But I think socially and culturally and other things, we still need more of a balance, and we can talk more about that. But I think this is, with this election and everything, this is also a new moment for DAOs, just like we've had Ukraine DAO and Choice DAO and Iran DAO and all these DAOs helping people. I think this is also heralding another moment for more social impact through DAOs.
Yeah, that might be the case, right? And I think, part of our mission here at Web3 Warriors has always been to empower creators, artists with what we call the creator economy on the blockchain, or the on-chain creator economy, right? But to your point, when it comes to social impact, and like you say, we've seen it in Ukraine with a whole bunch of fundraising, when all these other mechanisms to get money into Ukraine had basically shut down because people were worried that the Russians were just going to take it or whatever the case might be. Crypto came to the rescue and did end up getting a lot of funds in there. And I personally bought some NFTs that were, all the revenues were going to help people in Ukraine, right? Ditto for Afghanistan.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, it was a couple.
Thank
there
you.
were a couple
Thank you
initiatives.
for that.
Oh, well, I tried.
Thank you for that, by the way, because my you may not know the exact context, but also to the viewers, I want to make sure they know. Crypto Drifting, aka Alona Shevchenko, who's one of the co-founders of Ukraine DAO, is one of my best friends. Shout out to her.
Oh, wow.
She started that effort with only a handful of people. Shout out to Slomo and Risen, two of the other guys involved with starting Ukraine DAO, who are now doing all kinds of wonderful things. So I've for quite some time been quite deep in the social impact space, and these sort of DAO OGs I'll credit as a lot of my mentors along the way.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I have to stay on that because that's fascinating, and that's so key to kind of what the Web3 Warriors show is all about, and really what my passion for the technology comes down to is real social impact, and not necessarily on whatever ideology you might lean towards, but just genuine help, like genuine, like there's a creator here, or there's, you know, a social need here, and they're actually putting the work in to sell, you know, whether it's art, whether it's 3D assets, whatever the case might be, to gain revenue, to be able to help and make a difference. So how are DAOs kind of working in that? So you use the example of Ukraine DAO, which sounds amazing. How does that kind of work in real life? You know, how does it end up reaching out to new people and bring in kind of support, whether it's financial revenue support, whether it's raising awareness, whether it's just being a home, right, in the digital world for people that are of like mind, and whether it's in Ukraine suffering, you know, wanting to help family members, whatever the case might be. Where's the crossroad there between the real life and the DAO? And do you think that that narrative is really holding, or is it always going to be kind of a narrative that really only applies to the nerds like us who care about decentralization and want to, you know, be part of the story, right? But do you think normies out there, I hate to use that word, but like your average person out there really sees the value in a DAO and its abilities to create social impact? Long-winded question there, but yeah.
No, they do, and there's a great way to kick that off, which is first of all, you're right. It's going to go beyond our space. It's for everyone. It's for the normies. It's for the whole world. And I'll specify what I mean there, which is, you hit the nail on the head already. You already suggested this. The first touch point that will continue to educate people about why DAOs matter to everyone is charity. Charity is still going to be the next touch point. I know people will say when they hear this, like, wait, but we've already like done a lot with charity in the DAO space. Not really. We've had some great moments, but there's still a lot more good to come, in my opinion. That's why I mentioned this election and the macro climate now and everything happening. I think there's never been a better moment to do even more with DAO-based charity. And I think that the easiest way to educate people on why DAOs matter and will sort of take over the world on a gradient scale, which we can get more into too, is through charity as the first tipping point, as maybe Malcolm Gladwell or someone like that would say it. This is the next tipping point. We need everyone to see that DAOs are the next logical stage for charity because of how open they are, because of how easy it is to see. It just goes from point A to point B, and there's no middlemen taking a bunch of pieces of the pie without you knowing about it when you're trying to get it to people who need help, for example. And then on top of all that, because of what happens after the initial DAO activations, like Ukraine DAO has now splintered off into just many different Ukrainians and foreigners and other people doing all kinds of other DAOs and initiatives through their example. Rev Miller is one who helped found Ukraine DAO, and now him and his wife and other people are doing all kinds of different charitable initiatives through that example and through other examples.
Amazing, amazing. Awesome. Well, we'll pick that apart about a little bit more, but before that, let's dive into a bit about Push Protocol. Can you share kind of high level, you know, maybe a little bit of background history? I believe it was previously EPNS. I'm not too familiar with that one either. So, you know, what is Push Protocol? What's the mission and vision? It claims to be the communication protocol of Web3, a native communication network enabling cross-chain notifications, messaging, and more for apps, wallets, and services. That's just right off their website. So maybe you can go a little deeper on that for us. What is Push Protocol all about?
Yeah, of course. It's also actually a beautiful and unique story of how Push Protocol got founded and how we got to where we are today, which also best illustrates what it is and why we even matter. Like in 2020, Harsh and the founding team, they founded everything. They created the original Push Protocol at an ETH Global hackathon of all things. Nice. So like an ETH Global money hack in 2020. Nice. They then got more support through, of course, Gitcoin and several other communities like that, and a bunch of cool angel investors like Sandeep from Polygon and Kane from Synthetics and many others like that.
Awesome.
Kartik from A Capital. And then over the years, like you just suggested, we started as Ethereum push notification service because we started on Ethereum. And like I just kind of said, we were very deeply rooted in Ethereum from the get-go. That was where our first support was and all of those things. But we evolved more recently into just push protocol because one, that's the core functionality of what we do, communicated most simply. And two, because we're not just pushing like push notifications, but we believe we're pushing the boundaries of what it means to communicate online and on chain and just what it should mean to communicate online in general.
Awesome.
So of course, then we can get into what push protocol is.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So push protocol in the most basic sense is an app and a set of smart contracts, or in other words, an app and the base layer for people trying to build things like customizable messages and push notifications that are fully on chain. So it's a set of rules and an app that showcases that set of rules in practice. And now that has evolved into over 700 connections with that set of rules and all kinds of customizable push notifications and messaging across many aspects of the crypto industry and many key players. So to put it even more specifically, push protocol is an ecosystem that facilitates just about any way you can imagine messaging on chain.
Wow. So what does that dashboard look like? Like I went through to the push governance and I can see kind of a list of notifications and it's got the chain kind of logo beside it. These all look like Ethereum ones, but I assume, you know, it would be able to go across different chains. But what do you see the practical use case looking like, right? Like as, for example, I'm big in the metaverse. I love the idea of collecting 3D assets. I love the idea of showing off my NFTs in the metaverse. And let's say, you know, I've created a new gallery and I want, you know, all of my on-chain collectors in the, let's, for this sake, act like I'm an artist. I do have some NFTs, but I haven't sold that many. But let's say you're an artist who has sold a bunch of NFTs and you want to let all your collectors know that you now have this on-chain gallery available and you want to send a message to them. So how is push notifications making that, you know, a reality? Because right now you're basically airdropping some random notice to everybody on their wallet, which shows up as basically an NFT. That's the way I've seen people do it, as a kind of, hey, all my collectors, look at this is happening now. So does push look to kind of create a more simple version that isn't as maybe clunky or as time consuming as basically airdropping people stuff? What does that notification actually look like, or communication layer, whatever it is?
Yeah, so in the most fundamental sense, that's exactly right. You're hitting the nail on the head there. We're looking to simplify things and we're looking to streamline things. So to put that in a more specific sense again, imagine you wanted to launch a channel, and inside of that channel you have, just like you would have with a newsletter or something like that, you have the wallet addresses of all of your collectors. You put all those wallet addresses into the channel. It's opt-in. They all opt into it. And through that channel, they're all sent notifications both into the push app and into their wallets. So even if they're like somewhere else on the internet and you're having an event in the metaverse in the gallery you just mentioned, you can bump a mass push notification to all of the wallets at once and say, the event's happening this Friday at 5. This is what it entails. This is the benefits you get. Hope to see you all there. Thank you for all your support. And they get that notification no matter like what site they're on, what they're doing at the time, as long as, for example, their wallet's open, or if in many cases people just use the push app for that. But I'm using the wallet example because that's more powerful, right, in the sense that, you know, you can have your wallet anywhere as an extension on your browser.
The app is kind of Web2, right? I mean, I'm sure there's Web3 components because it's like using the wallet address, it's integrating your wallet, right? But ultimately, you know, needing to be in the app and have it as a messaging app essentially is kind of Web2-ish, right? So then you're saying it feels Web2 in a good way, but it has the Web3 benefits. Okay. That's something we can get into more, but our UX team and the way we approach UX is very much like, let's make it way more intuitive than crypto has ever been before, but keep the benefits that need to be there and what makes crypto special. Awesome. So everyone can check this out at push.org. I'll just mention that, make that quick plug for anyone who wants to see kind of the app. Allows you to connect through to the app, or wants to get a little bit more information about how they function. So on the Web3 wallet side, so you're saying the notification that comes up, is that as an NFT, or it's just like a wallet sign message that kind of just prompts on your wallet as long as you have it active?
Not an NFT, exactly what you
Right.
said in the second one, basically.
Okay.
And the easiest other way to explain that is we do have a MetaMask snap. So that's one fundamental way that happens. Let's say there's because this has happened, there's a decentralized exchange that wants to be able to send out mass notifications to liquidity providers when certain events happen in the market. So they can snap in through our MetaMask snap, develop whatever customizable notifications they want to develop with us, and they can all run through the MetaMasks of their LPs.
Okay, this is cool. And then so I'm seeing like the actual push app, at least on the dashboard on the website, is kind of almost like a timeline type of thing, except it's specific to the different users or the different entities. So I'm looking at Coin Shots right now, which is saying they're instant crypto news, updates, and market moves curated by humans, not bots. So that's important. We got a lot of AI bots pushing out these news feeds these days. So you land on the app, you connect your wallet, you subscribe to Coin Shots. Now you're getting the notifications right on the app here if you check it out, but also as a signature kind of message on your actual decentralized wallet when that news hits.
Yeah, it's fully customizable exactly from day one when you're creating an instance like that with the team involved, like Coin Shots or any other team like that. As long as they go through the process properly and they say like, we want it to go to everyone's wallets. We want this, we want that. Our team works with them to make it happen. We're very hands-on like that. Like you can compare us in one way to the Farcaster team in the early days that Dan Romero was onboarding the first couple hundred or more users himself. We're still in a way onboarding all the integrations very hands-on and making sure they have everything they need just personally like that as much as possible.
No doubt. Farcaster is an interesting one for sure. I've been trying to get a little more active on there, but I don't know. It's crazy times right now when it comes to social media. And yeah,
that's true.
I like that they're still very Web3. I'm not sure how they're handling the data conversation. I think that's so important when looking at social media because every social media company wants to use your data to basically, profit off of it, monetize it. Interesting though, very cool, and I love the app. I definitely recommend everybody go check it out at push.org. Moving on to the DAO conversation, right? So why does Push need a DAO? What is the kind of purpose of the decentralized autonomous organization within Push, and how does it kind of butt up against the overall governance of the project or of the platform?
Yeah, great question. First of all, sorry if you can hear like noise in the background. Someone's blowing leaves into my door, but that's the fun of Web3 too. We can be doing things at any time and things.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I don't hear much.
Okay, good. Thank you to the listeners as well, just in case. But yeah, this is a great question. The first thing I would do is compare it to the most comparable thing that exists now, which is something like Uniswap DAO or Aave DAO. We are also a protocol DAO. We are just, unlike some, evolving in a more intentional, progressive fashion rather than, for example, here's the DAO, full-scale takeover of everything right away. We're progressively decentralizing with a very intentional plan, so it's piece by piece over a timeline. But right now, Push DAO is the entire ecosystem grants program is under the DAO, a bunch of marketing activities, a bunch of BD activities. We're launching a podcast. So in the easiest possible way for anyone listening, you can think of Push DAO as extra marketing and awareness and things like ambassador hubs for Push, but also as controlling the entire ecosystem grants program. That's not actually controlled by a centralized entity.
Wow. And what's that grant kind of budget like, and how are you handling the oversight of it, I guess? Like obviously with votes, but is there any nuance to kind of how the votes are handled, how you kind of let your members know that the votes are happening? Because in my experience, that's like half the battle is getting people to care enough to actually pay attention, to when governance things are happening, and B, show up when that vote is required, right? So it's like,
Exactly.
it seems like there's a lead time. Like you say, they have to be kind of ambassadors, actually like passionate about the platform, right? So that's like half the battle, is getting people to actually care that much. And then it's the actual activity of voting. So I don't know. I'm just curious how you're handling that, and what does that look like for you guys?
All of this is true. And I'll clarify, for anyone saying that that ever becomes not a battle or not an issue you always have to solve with DAOs, they're not being truthful, because these things of voter turnout and keeping people engaged are just constant things to solve with DAOs. And that's okay. That's something I enjoy, that sometimes with DAOs, there's continuous issues that you're always pivoting to solve in different ways. It makes it more intricate of a space to be in, more interesting as well of a space to be in. But how we handle it, well, speaking of progressive decentralization, we started with, before I was here, the grants program was more centrally controlled. Then I arrived at Push, then it became under the DAO for the first time this year. That started, and still is now until the end of the year, with a grants council controlling what grants get passed and stuff like that. So think of it like delegates. They were voted in by the community that represent the community, and they review everything and they approve everything in the interest of the community. But just like I said, they were voted in, so the community had a chance. They did see it. If they didn't like the people, they could be like, nope, goodbye, we want different people. But they did like the people. So that's the grants council right now. We have a nice mix, because it's for people basically just from the community only, never with the foundation. And then I'm the only one that straddles both lines, because that's often how these protocol DAOs have to be. You have someone who gets hired by the foundation to do all this community stuff, but you're like in the DAO and in the foundation at the same time. So that's an interesting dance too.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's how we're handling that now, and it's been going well. Our inbound has exponentially increased over the course of this year. And in 2025, something you mentioned will happen. There'll be even more direct involvement with the next iteration of the grants program, meaning it'll be certain grants. For example, we'll pilot it most likely with the highest grants, in our case, 20K plus grants. And with those that are already harder to get and have stricter frameworks by design, we'll add in a measure most likely that there has to be a community vote for it to fully pass. So that's the way we're thinking about trialing that now, speaking again of progressive decentralization, starting with like the most expensive things, having an extra community vote, and then doing all of it.
That's interesting. So as of right now, the grants council is it. That's they're kind of deliberating and dealing out the grants as they decide. But like you say, there'll be bigger votes in the future. That's really cool. And I love that you're getting a lot of interest and buy-in. And I have to say, just looking at this kind of DAO governance overview, and you have a lot of docs, a lot of notifications and kind of news posts, and really just a lot to chew on, frankly. If people want to check out push.org again, you can go to gov.push.org and really get a breakdown of kind of the governance side of things.
You're not wrong. There's quite, they should know that for anyone listening, there's quite a deep history for a DAO that's only been in its current iteration for less than a year. There's a lot going on.
Less than a year? I thought this was like 3 years in the making. This is a lot happening.
The DAO, yes. Yeah. But the current iteration, the current version of the DAO, only less than a year, meaning it was very different before, like 6 months ago. For example, the grants program was not fully under the DAO.
Wow. Okay, so as far as you were just mentioning how it is kind of only accessible for members of the DAO, right? So you have to kind of join Push, be aware of the mission, the vision, kind of buy into it. Is there, I assume there's no is there a fee or like an NFT you have to hold to actually be a member of the DAO?
So to join the DAO, no. The only thing we suggest, and we'll be doing more things to put that into place for better skin in the game, so to speak, is that you have to hold Push, obviously, to vote. That's not just a suggestion, actually. Like that's the only way you vote on Snapshot. So the active voting happens there. But as far as participating in the grants program, anyone can. They're just only going to be reviewed by the DAO itself, not some centralized entity. So you want to understand the DAO to get a Push grant, because the DAO is the one deciding whether you get the grant or not.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And the Push token, speak to that a little bit. So you got to hold it. Is it on Ethereum? what is the push token, and how are you handling the governance token conversation?
So yeah, it is a governance token as well as other things. It is an ERC20. It's always been an ERC20.
Nice, yeah.
And the DAO for this year currently and next year will receive yearly allocations, as happens with many earlier DAOs, from the foundation. So it's not controlled by the foundation, but they give us the budget and they say, here you go, do your planning and stuff with it. Mm-hmm. They're not sitting over us going, you have to do it this way and that way. They're giving it to us and saying, good luck, go do what you were saying you were going to do, which is the right way to do it.
Yeah. Sure.
And then the current plan, why I mentioned that, is that most likely after next year, the 12-month budget from the foundation, there'll be a more sustainable model in place, such as push token fees or something analogous to that, sustaining the DAO, which is how every DAO should be. And we can get more into that, but every DAO should eventually be completely self-sustaining, or else it's never really a full DAO.
Yeah, but to the other point around keeping people engaged, keeping things going, that's the flip side of that, right? Like, you want to be self-sustaining, but do you have the people power to make that happen, right? And even like, you could have the people power today, 6 months from now, or some kind of horrible market crash happens, and now the longevity, people get discouraged, whatever the case might be. But you look at some, that is the hardest part, right? Just kind of pushing back against people being discouraged, essentially.
No, it is. I was just going to say, you couldn't be more right about that. And one way we're handling that now, and we're very fortunate, is that most of our most active DAO members who are in like the highest positions or controlling work streams or running the grants program are exactly who they should be, meaning they're the people who have been around in the push ecosystem for quite some time, and we're always hoping for and working for the DAO to improve to where it is today. And now that it has improved, they're in even higher positions, and they're controlling most of the DAO as delegates and things like that. And that's what I would recommend. That's the ideal situation. The most vision aligned, the most experienced people in your DAO should be the ones rising upward and upward, helping everyone stay engaged. In other words, it's just like a company in one way. Just like in a really successful company, the top people have to be the most vision aligned, or else like people will be like, why am I even here? The leader doesn't even care about what's happening that much.
100%. And Harsh, shout out to Harsh. He does seem to be very passionate about the platform and the project, and one of those leaders who's not going to be going anywhere, right? So that's always good to see, and helps the whole community and everyone who's trying to develop underneath it get a little bit more confidence. But yeah, I think it's interesting when it comes to DAOs and the potential for everything that you just described. I have to ask though, how important is liquidity to the kind of viability of a DAO, right? So you mentioned that Harsh and the creators essentially, got funded right from the jump at an ETH Global hackathon, right? Shout out to them though. You got to put in a lot of work. You got to do a lot of interesting, innovative stuff to get that initial funding. So not taking anything away from them, of course. But that does give you a nice little launch pad to launch from. And then there's other partnerships I see here. It shows Friends of Push, and there's a lot of recognizable brands here that are kind of bought into the narrative around the communication layer for Web3. So I guess how important is, having some liquidity, having funds to support people like you who are, going out into the community and doing some of the marketing push, or, governance people that are actually putting in that work day after day. I assume there are some paid roles here and there, right? To really kind of grease the wheels and make sure things keep moving forward.
Yes.
So how important is that?
Extremely. I'm not gonna dance around. I'm not gonna dance around.
The DAOs I've been working with have not been well funded, and it's been a problem.
I'm not going to dance around it at all. That's one of the biggest problems with DAOs today.
Right.
People think about it as, or some people do, as you just suggested. They even think about it as DAOs are so different. They can work without much funding, at least for a certain amount of time. Not really in most cases. You do need a considerable amount of funding because of what you just said. You may not need a ton of people at first, and that's true. We don't even have a ton of people, but we have like 8x our contributor base in 6 months, which is crazy.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
We do pay, thank you. We do pay all the top people, and it's transparent, and we even had our latest transparency report to the whole community a couple weeks ago. We tell everyone what's happening. It's all in the report. Unlike, as we know, some projects that unfortunately have said like, I'll do the audit or I'll do the transparency report, and then they don't. we are and we have done that, and we think that's important. So first of all, like I said, the top people and the most active people are always paid. And second of all, we're always transparent with the community about who's being paid what and what's happening and what could be better. And we're even critical, the top people at the DAO are even critical of ourselves in all kinds of ways and always suggest ways we can improve publicly. And then on top of all that, because people will wonder, wait, what about you? You're at the foundation. Are you also taking money from the DAO? No. And I think that's the right thing. From day one, I never took a cent from the DAO, and it all went to the community.
Awesome. Yeah, that it's important, right? And transparency is key. I think what you just spoke to, and the fact that you're doing these audits out in the open is really, really amazing and necessary. Because yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like I've worked with DAOs that struggle, and we all want to just push things forward, but without greasing the wheels and paying those who really put that time and effort in, it becomes hard, and people get discouraged and think like, why am I even doing this? I'm just burning out, and the value's not coming back around.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, because you're right. One of the biggest problems with DAOs is they're too opaque. They're not transparent enough, and things will happen. Like you'll just suddenly realize a couple people are being paid 5x more than everyone else in the same work stream or something like that. That doesn't make sense. And this is a problem of a lack of transparency and a lack of regular requirement for certain paths of accountability to the community.
Awesome. And so when it comes to that, providing value to people monetarily, and you mentioned kind of the most engaged, the most active. So is there like a reward structure side of it? I assume there are actual paid roles, but then there's also like, hey, you've been putting in the most work as a community member and you did XYZ. Here's, 3,000 push or whatever the case might be. Is that something you're doing as well?
No, you're right. It's actually both of those things in our case.
Nice.
And one is, to be more specific and to give a concrete example, is when we launched the two major sub-DAOs for this year that ran the grants sub-DAO and the business development sub-DAO. Inside of those votes, everything was spelled out, like all of the proposed budget, all of the proposed rewards, and all that was completely spelled out in the proposals and then the votes. So the whole time everyone knew what it was possible to earn, and then people started earning that stuff. And then on top of that, that's why I said the second part is also true. We've been rewarding every most active contributor from day one of this new iteration. So some examples would be, there's a contributor who calls himself Noober Boy, that's his tag. And he's just so good at many different things in the community, including he's now leading task boards for ambassadors as a project manager. He's reviewing content as a developer, as a technical reviewer of blogs and stuff like that, and many other things. So he is receiving extra compensation for all this extra work he's doing. And then we have a designer, Sophie, who's designing all kinds of assets, brand assets for the DAO. Nice. And of course, she's rewarded. That wasn't in the original sub-DAOs, but it's something we came up with over time. So of course, whoever's designing like that is rewarded. We have podcast editors coming on. Of course, they're being paid. And then of course, goes without saying, but we have ambassadors who are also paid.
Wow. That's awesome. And the fact that you're able to do that and you have the partnerships and the funding and all of that lined up to make it work. And like I say, the way you've laid it out on the site looks really good. And it's clear that you're up to a lot and actually, putting in that necessary
And shout out
work.
to Harsh.
Yeah.
You mentioned him, but
yeah.
Shout out to Harsh on this too, because from day one, when I started here, this is why this really is working with the DAO, because Harsh and Risha, the co-founders, were both like, we believe in this plan that I proposed to them. And then I took my same plan to the community, and the community believed in the plan, and they all got behind the plan.
Nice.
So shout out to the community and Harsh and Risha for always believing in the DAO.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I want to touch on something you mentioned, sub-DAOs, and I love the idea of kind of sub-DAOs, which, correct me if I'm wrong, are essentially committees underneath the main DAO, right? But because it's on chain, you can kind of set it up as a sub DAO where you still have an actual on chain connection to the main kind of umbrella DAO. And now you said you had a business development one and you got a grants one. Totally makes sense. So can you just explain kind of how that sub DAO structure works, just for the audience more so?
Yep.
And then I'm wondering if there's any kind of like on-chain components to it. Like, do you have an ENS name or something like that you kind of tie to different wallets for each DAO? Or I don't know. I'm just curious what it looks like, the structure.
No, those are great questions because these are all things we're thinking about now. Even if we're not doing some of them now, we're planning on doing them. For example, just to touch on that real quick, because you just said it, adding in ENS names, adding in things like hats for DAO members to make it more specific in terms of their contributions or connections with Coordinate and other tools. We've got a lot of plans for that in 2025 intentionally. So it was like in 2024, we needed to make sure the most basic structures worked and we needed to test a few things. So 2024 was more of an A/B live testing of the DAO. And then 2025 is very much a refinement year. But in terms of how the sub DAOs worked, they were staffed by community members. They had all of their budgets and the scope of their activities and their strategies and KPIs laid out in the proposals and votes.
Beautiful.
All of those KPIs and strategies connected, as you kind of said, upwards in an umbrella towards the like master strategy of the DAO and the ecosystem from day one. So the most beautiful thing was for our sub DAOs, yes, they were like on-chain committees and they should be like that, but they were always, and every DAO should do this, aligned with a master strategy from day one. So we made sure everyone knows what page to be on because it's the same strategy for everyone with slightly different KPIs based on your experience, of course, because you're like a designer or a marketer or a BD person, you have slightly different tasks than a grants person or a developer.
Yeah, and looking at that overarching strategy, right, like that's a lot of work. And so when you're looking at those kind of foundational documents, whether it's business development documents, whether it's grants, whether it's KPIs, like key performance indicators that you want to hit, right, are those paid positions? Because to me, that seems like a super heavy lift, you know? And so is that kind of a community effort, or are there, like you said, key leaders who are paid, who are staff members and put in that extra work to kind of like get all this formal kind of documentation of the actual entity done? Because I feel like you kind of have, it's both. Okay. Awesome.
No, sorry. I was just, you're so on point with all this.
I'm down. I'm putting in the time, man. And I'm genuinely like, I want it to be,
we're aligned.
I want it to be a thing that works, you know? That's why I'm glad that, yeah, we're aligned and you see the pain points that I have experienced personally, frankly. And I just wonder, yeah, back to that main point of like, can any of this really get done without a decent amount of funding from the jump, you know? And I feel like that's so key to a successful DAO, is actually having that kind of launch mechanic and having the kind of key roles staffed, frankly, and not just voluntary.
No, you're right. And just to be clear, because I should mention this, I would be remiss not to. You can get a considerable amount of funding through tools like Juicebox or something like that still, through like just bunches of crypto community members. It's just harder in a lot of cases, but I still love those models. I was just mentioning the foundation model because that's what PushDAO is doing. PushDAO is a protocol DAO, but definitely true in both cases. And to your current question, like I said, we're very aligned because that's pretty much exactly how we're doing things. The answer is, again, both. And the way it works out in practice is we have the DAO council, the 5 people running the whole DAO as delegates voted in. They also do all of the documentation and strategy and KPIs and agree on all that stuff to make it happen and architect all of those votes. So yes, they are paid for all of that. There are also any community members that contribute to that. Everyone's always free to do so. And any community member who contributes, even just like editing a strategic document or something, gets paid. Because
that's amazing.
I and the council believe that we can DAO and still get paid. And we believe also that, as I just suggested, DAOs should be even more meritocratic. And if you're doing great work, why shouldn't you always be rewarded? Not just through money, though, to be clear, but we're working on being way more transparent than any DAO has ever been about based on what you are, what's your like career path going to be in this DAO. And so everybody in 2025 is about to see PushDAO pioneer sort of a new model for showing the roads from the get-go, showing you here's all the things happening in this DAO, here's all the different paths for each position and such.
That's amazing, man. And I have to say, I'm feeling a little bit of FOMO. I got to dive in here and get a little bit more involved, because I at surface level I understood, but hearing you kind of speak to the transparency, speak to the accountability, and the way that the governance is really being managed, and the way you're staffing some and rewarding others who put in that extra time and effort, like, it just seems so perfect. So kudos to you and the team and the community and Harsh and the leadership for sure. That's quite impressive, I have to say. And looking over all of the documents and all the content you have on the site here, it's something to behold. I'm curious, do you have a kind of best practices DAO that you point to? I know you mentioned Ukraine DAO, and that's more on the kind of charity and social impact angle. Like I look at Ethereum Name Service was one that frankly rewarded me a long time ago, back in 2021, for getting some ENS names, which was amazing. Probably the biggest Web3 win that I've had outside of a couple of good NFT sales, but that was pretty cool. So I'm wondering, like, do you look at ENS DAO as a kind of best case example, or is there one that you would point to where you think they're really doing everything right and they're a good example of why a DAO structure works?
There are many, and I'm a fan of them. It's not a cop-out answer. It's the opposite. There are many, and I'm a fan of them for different reasons, because who I am as a person as well. That's how I do things. I like to not take like one, KOL or one key opinion DAO, so to speak. I like to take a bunch of them and aggregate like a multitude of opinions into my opinion and learn from a bunch of things at once rather than one or two things. But to mention ENS DAO for a second, definitely a great example. They do a lot of things right. And I'll do a quick shout out. Just because we don't have ENS names in Push DAO now doesn't mean we never will. And I do obviously have one ENS name of my own.
Of course.
I am a fan. But yeah, as to other examples, just quickly to re-mention that, you said Ukraine DAO, to specify that, because some people may not know this, but they pioneered getting a lot of people involved in a DAO who didn't know anything about crypto at all. They had tons of Ukrainians involved who didn't even have to hold the token to be involved, and they were DAOing without even really knowing they were DAOing. Nice. So their onboarding was super on point. And just as I mentioned, Alona is a super good friend of mine, my best friend, in fact. So we've learned a lot from each other. Then there's a lot of protocol DAOs. So obviously, when we're talking about architecting Push DAO, I would be remiss to not try to learn from the Uniswaps and the Compounds and the Aves of the world, because they're all scaling and they're all the same kind of DAO that we're becoming. We're becoming, in the sense that we're becoming fully decentralized over time, as I mentioned. So all of those apply. And then you think about even like NFT communities and gaming communities and smaller things and the beautiful things they're doing even in today's world. And that's why I say almost everything. You can learn from gaming communities in terms of just how directly involved Web3 gamers are and how passionate they are about these sort of DAOs or guilds in gaming. There's a lot to learn there. Or in NFT communities, there's a lot to learn about making it a good two-way street between artists and fans and making it a mutually beneficial ecosystem. Shout out to the Lao actually on a lot of that. So for some of you who may not know, look up the Lao and Priyanka and Aaron and all they're doing there. Great people, supporters of Push too. And Lao, they help
LAO?
Yeah, and they help a lot of art DAOs and investment DAOs and other leading DAOs thrive.
Very cool.
So I've learned a lot from people like that. And I'll just put it even more simply, because this is true. I learn in terms of DAOing from almost anyone who's in crypto, who's done anything with growing a community. Because to me, my driving model for DAOs is it's inevitably the future of all community. Now, to clarify that, I do not mean everyone's going to be running everything by a swarm. I mean, a lot of things, some things will be run like that fully, more and more over time. But I more mean we'll get to an age in which, just like software ate the world, DAOs eat the world, except on a gradient scale, if that makes sense. So some industries will be like partial DAOs and take pieces of it, and that's okay. Others will be far more DAOified. For example, I think it'll be at least quite a long time before like an airline becomes DAOified, but we'll see.
But even some of these tech forward, like speaking of, maybe someone like an Elon Musk, right, who's a very controversial figure these days, but looking at someone like that, it seems like they benefit from extremely centralized power, right? And they really love the idea that like this could never happen without me, you know? Like, and it seems like most, you know, even the Steve Jobs and others who, you know, are undeniably geniuses and made a huge impact on society and technology, in a lot of ways, they seem to definitely lean on teams and obviously build out very skilled and successful teams, but they also make no qualms about, you know, being that leader and taking decisive action and being able to basically, you know, make the call for the whole organization instantaneously. And I guess that's going to be, or what I've seen is that's the criticism of DAOs, where not everything should have to go through, you know, kind of decentralized structures to get approval and to be, you know, actioned essentially, right? And that might actually end up creating a lack of innovation or a lack of kind of forward movement where it could happen. So I'm just curious, playing devil's advocate, you know, the idea that DAOs are going to eat the world is like, there will be no more CEO structure, or at least not in the traditional sense, if that were to happen. And so I just wonder, you know, to play a little devil's advocate to that, like, can it be a viable option in a, you know, not to be political about it, capitalist world, right? Like, can it really work?
It can.
Yeah.
It can, but there's a lot more education that needs to be done. To clarify, I don't disagree with that. I actually agree. That's maybe my hot take in today's world in crypto. I don't actually think everything needs to be fully a swarm or fully like a full-fledged, chaotic, totally community-run DAO. I believe there's just inevitably always going to be some things in the world that aren't DAOified, and that's fine. But when I say DAOs eating the world, I believe what you were suggesting, which is it'll become the standard, but it doesn't mean, as with any standard, that everyone will fully adopt the standard. It doesn't mean everybody will be like, I want to do all of this right now. I'm going to give up all of this power, as you mentioned, for like the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs. I find it hard to believe, at least in the near future, those people will get behind DAOs. I think you're right about that. But at the same time, many of them will, because there's a certain class of powerful entrepreneur, however you want to put that, that does understand that they can still affect the same change in a community run or collectively run model like a DAO. And they can do that because it doesn't take away their visionary status or their extraordinary abilities. It's additive to them. It's people with a certain mindset that realize that. And so instead of like Elon Musk being the figurehead of Tesla and everything else, a DAOified version of that would be the brand is just as powerful, but it's a bunch of people speaking in the same voice instead of one. That's tricky to run. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means you have to be super aligned to make a really successful DAOified company.
Yeah, and speak to the monetary advantages of it, right? So a lot of people look at it and think, oh, well, this means I'm sharing more of the wealth, and, you know, that old kind of scarcity mindset, right, where there's a limited pie. And I think in Web3 we know it's an abundant pie, and there's always more kind of, you know, you take from it and there's more value, and as long as there's value being exchanged, then, you know, that should be something that everyone can kind of buy into and benefit from. So I guess looking at that, like whether it's the push token that you guys are using and compensating people through that, right? How do you see that kind of working in a more real world sense? And do you think that that's also part of this new kind of era? Is it going to be more normal to reward not just your direct staff, but actually reward your community who's buying into your products and maybe adding a little extra feedback than most of your other customers? Maybe you give them some kind of token, right? Or how is the DAO structure in Web3 going to change kind of the relationship between the corporation and the customer?
Two quick ways, one which is like for profit, so to speak, and one which is clearly nonprofit. The two next tipping points in that respect, and I'm sure of this, will be charity and loyalty programs. So first, just to quickly touch on charity, I mean, it's inevitable for basically all charities to be DAOified. Some of us know why that is. Some of us may not quite know, but it boils down to just how transparent a DAOified charity is and just how quickly and efficiently the money gets to exactly where it needs to be without middlemen above all else. And then of course, on top of that, equally as much, it boils down to a charity is supposed to be a bunch of people making positive impact in the world on a certain issue or something like that. So isn't the DAO the perfect model for that because of how you can collectively vote on everything and where you make that impact? That's the way I think about it. Then
100%.
on the corporate side, like you just said, changing the relationship between the business and the consumer, the next tipping point is loyalty programs because of what you just said too, because it's inevitable that loyalty programs will be DAOified. People are already making closer and closer connections with their favorite brands in today's world. We know many examples of brands like giving you more and more of a VIP experience based on how much you buy, how much you post about them on social media, all that stuff. So it just kind of makes sense that there'll be some kind of DAO-based loyalty programs as a standard in the next few years, because the corporation will still be able to control its day-to-day operations and treasury and all that. But like you just basically suggested, the consumers will vote on like the next fashion line or the next set of artists to be in a concert series, all kinds of cool things like that that they care about, or album covers for their favorite artists, a list of potential songs where they say like, I'm going to add 2 of these songs to the album, but you're my VIP fans. Can you listen to these 5 songs and pick 2? Stuff like that.
That is super cool. And it's like you said, super fans, right? So now on a data side, you're kind of getting more deep and more granular on your own customers, your own fans, your own supporters, whatever the case might be. If you're a creator or an artist, or if you're a company and it's just your customers, it's only a certain kind of sliver of customers that are going to take that extra initiative to be part of your DAO, to vote on certain initiatives. And now you have that information about who those people are. You can reward them directly on chain if you'd like to, but you also just have that for your own purposes, for marketing purposes, or whatever the case might be. So there's so much value in that, in the data that comes with having more of this engagement. However, how do you feel about the Starbucks situation, right? Because they kind of had partnered with Polygon. I think it lasted, 2 years? When it started, I saw the vision. I was like, okay, this is exactly what the loyalty program kind of revolution, the Web3 loyalty program is going to look like, right? They had metaverse integration. They had Polygon supporting their tokens. And then now they were starting to reward their customers, essentially, who have the app and have the loyalty program. I don't think the metaverse piece ever actually went fully live, but the concept was there, and then it all kind of just faded away within like a year or 2. I'm not sure if there was some background kind of like Polygon was charging them too much money or whatever, but definitely a lack of transparency is a clear piece of it. But what do you think happened there, and why do you think that loyalty program example, which seemed like it should have been a very solid use case, fell apart there?
So I don't think it was anything nefarious, to clarify.
Okay.
I was saying you're right, because I do see what you're suggesting in a good way, like that we could have done more. So I think you're right. We could have done more in certain areas, or done it in a different way. And I wouldn't blame it on any one party involved, but I would say what my conclusion is, which is when I was looking at that, and I was looking at that initiative between Polygon and Starbucks, I came to this thought, which is, you went on their marketplace, you looked at all those stamps and stuff you could get through that program. And I was thinking, as a consumer, I'm just like, I like Starbucks coffee, so I clicked on it too. And it wasn't really clear what you could do with the NFTs after you accrued them. There wasn't too much to do, at least. My thought is, first of all, at least, they should walk the walk even more with future initiatives like that, and I believe they will. With all these past examples, future corporations will. This should have been literally like a loyalty program. This should not have been just a pilot like it was. It should have been the next stage of the whole loyalty program. They should have put everything behind it, and they should have, easier said than done, but that is what I think. And they should have said, this many stamps earns you this many drinks, or this and that, and very, very clear rewards that just regular consumers care about. Because they'll do the NFTs, they'll do the metaverse stuff, but the reason they'll do it inside of a loyalty program is because they're getting rewards they can understand.
They want some free coffee. It's not that hard. It's just like the little check boxes on the card that you get. If you get 5 cups, you get a free coffee, whatever the case might be. But you can make it more fun, make it more gamified, right?
So I think kind of like, and it's understandable, the parties involved are probably just like super excited about all that we're doing in crypto. They tried to make it very crypto, but maybe it ended up too crypto. And we need to think more about how, like I said, we can just give the tangible benefits at the center of everything. We think about it that at Push too. We don't just think about like the cool crypto things that apps do that come into our grants program. We think about how intuitive is your UX? What exactly is keeping people around here? What are your actual monthly user numbers? All of that stuff.
Right. Of course. Of course. Fascinating, man. So I'm just curious, like looking at that cross-chain angle about it and the fact that you did start on Ethereum and your token is an ERC20. What is the cross-chain piece of Push right now? Are you kind of actively building out new tokenomics on Solana or any other chain? Or what is the communication layer there? Because I was looking kind of at the friends and the dashboard, and it does look like the majority of them are still in the Ethereum ecosystem, right? Yet you definitely speak to being cross-chain. So I'm just curious, is this a work in progress, or do you have kind of vision in 2025 to be a little more active on one or two of the other chains, or is it all still going to be very EVM heavy?
No, again, sounds like I'm just repeating myself,
Right.
but it just happens to be true. The first answer is both. It's a work in progress and it's a vision specifically for starting in 2025, basically. But I can get more specific. For example, people can find this publicly on the governance forum. We had a push improvement proposal, a pre-pip to be exact, which is a new initiative we launched this year where the foundation proposes things to the community and does them with the community's support. And one of the things that went through in that respect was a proposal from a foundation set of developers to launch cross-chain capabilities with Wormhole through the Push ecosystem. So that's one thing that's being worked on: cross-chain requests, the NTT framework, the Wormhole relayers, facilitating Push moving through everything that Wormhole's connected to. So that's a big point there. Another thing I can quickly mention is that so far, based on current timelines, we're likely launching with Solana in January or February. So we'll have Solana capabilities for push integrations and things like that. This year, we launched some L2s. We had the launch of Cyber and we had an Arbitrum launch. So things like that. We went from mostly just like Polygon and Ethereum and a couple others to more L2s like that. So it went from like that first step to L2s to, like you just suggested, the 2025 vision being far more interoperability in more ways than one.
Awesome.
Another thing to quickly mention is that we can still do, if you go to our website and look at the chains supported and things like that, any of those that are supported, we can make connections to. And the other thing is to quickly reiterate, there's a lot more in progress behind the scenes, and I wish I could announce everything now, but super bullish and lots more in 2025.
That is exciting, man. Very cool. Very cool. And do you have any thoughts towards the Solana versus ETH kind of conversation? Obviously, yes. I think, it's a both and situation, but I'm curious on, obviously you've been pretty heavy in the EVM space and the Ethereum ecosystem. Obviously, you're not totally opposed to Solana since you're launching January, February next year. So how do you feel about that kind of, I wouldn't call it a competition, more of a, contrast?
We don't call it a competition either. So I'll speak to what I personally feel and what we at Push feel. What we at Push feel is what you just suggested, that just look at our connections. We don't cut anyone out. We believe we only succeed together. And it's not just like a flowery or all-encompassing statement. We show it in practice. We have over 700 connections and counting to all kinds of projects and chains and other things. So the answer there is that Push believes in both of those equally. In the sense of that they're both going to be equally successful in their own ways, which is also important. You said, but they have that contrast. We believe that, of course, technically, just speaking about the facts, there are technical contrasts and trade-offs, but we support both. And then I personally believe I've always invested and involved myself in both ecosystems. And I find it funny. I kind of laugh when everyone fights all the time. And I just say, hey, man, not just can't we all just get along, but I hope we all understand, and I think we will eventually, that far more than one or two chains will exist in perpetuity.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And when I look at the contrast there, and I support both as well. And as someone who collects art on chain, a lot of art, more than I care to admit, I definitely lean on the Ethereum, and I love Tezos as well. But I do hang on to the immutability concept, right? And I think it's a very important piece of collecting art on chain and collecting NFTs. And I want to believe that all the NFTs I buy are immutable into the future. But as you know, an important part of making it immutable is the decentralized network and the idea that no matter what happens, it is going to live on forever. And so I trust in Ethereum's decentralization. I don't know too much about Tezos's, but I know they're very global in reach and they do seem very community level. So I'm not sure on the actual technical network and how centralized it is, but it seems fairly global in scope. Solana obviously still has global developers all over the world, but from a kind of entity and from a organization structure and from kind of the central body that seems to run things. And frankly, I heard Anatoly just the other day really just kind of poo-pooing the idea of decentralized currency in general. So it was kind of interesting that like he wasn't even trying to claim that Solana is at all decentralized in a real kind of global long-lasting sense. So that's my one concern I have about Solana. I will say I love how fast it is. I love the art community over there, even the meme coin community. As much as I don't get too involved in that, it's pretty cool and fun to see all the culture and what's taken on there. But from that purely decentralization conversation, I do have some concerns, and I hope that my NFTs will last into the foreseeable future on Solana. But that's where I think there is the criticism. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or if you think that's
No, I
valid.
It's most valid though if I speak from my personal opinion in
Sure.
that respect.
Yeah.
But my personal opinion is that I empathize with them quite deeply because I think they will be more and more decentralized over time. I can't say how centralized they are right now. I've heard all kinds of things,
Yeah.
but I'm a fan of Solana, and I believe they're actually just progressively decentralizing like we are at Push, and they're very dedicated to this intentional step-by-step decentralization. And of course, that rubs some crypto lifers the wrong way, and I don't blame them because they're like, hey man, like we've always believed in everything being decentralized. Why can't you do it a little more in a little more of a quickly committed fashion? But my personal opinion is the opposite in the way that I think we can have some people and entities progressively, slowly decentralizing and others doing it more quickly, and both are okay. And I've been involved, to be clear, in both kinds of communities and networks.
Nice. I like that. Keep an open mind and acknowledge the reasoning why, right? And ultimately at a technology level, no one can deny what Solana's been able to accomplish. No one can deny the kind of quick adoption that they have going on, the fact that they've got some industry partners now looking at it. I think Visa was talking about working with them, a lot of other kind of just for the speed of their rails and the accountability, because it is still blockchain, it is still transparent, accountable, everything is right there on chain for you to trace and be able to see. So it has all of those benefits. So thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. I know we are hitting that 1 hour mark here. I want to respect your time. I'm curious, do you have any other thoughts around 2025 in the crypto economy, the crypto markets, the NFT markets? Are we going to see a resurgence in collecting art on chain? I hope so, but I think there's a lot of speculation now. I'd just love to hear your thoughts as we wind down here.
I believe so, but I believe we need new ways of supporting. Like we had a nice, let's touch on that first because I'm very passionate about artists, and some of you listening may not know, but I also have been involved with several initiatives with NFTs. I raised an NFT startup with an NFT startup back in the day, all kinds of things like that.
Nice.
I love this use case. I love this direct connection between artists and fans in this way of, I'd like to see this, for example, in 2025. I think it'll take longer. I tried to be one of the people launching an NFT startup that was mostly focused on ensuring perpetual royalties, in customizable royalties, but perpetual on chain for artists of every type of medium. It would have worked, but it was too early and the team mix wasn't quite right. So I would maybe try to do that again one day. I still do think we need perpetual royalties, more guaranteed for artists, as one improvement. And I think we've done a decent job with launching a bunch of marketplaces, but we need something more to get more artists and fans involved. And one way I can mention that is piloting loyalty programs for musicians and artists as the next tipping point for NFTs. I think we'll get a ton of people involved in NFTs again once a couple big loyalty programs launch again with just NFTs. And when I say big, we go back to our Starbucks example earlier in this episode. I mean, really walk the walk, do it, make the whole loyalty program that way.
And do you see anyone looking at it? Are you hearing any rumblings? Is there one you're looking forward to the most, or that you think is doing things right when on the loyalty program front?
There are two areas where I see work still being done considerably in that respect off the top of my head. One, there's still innovation happening between like sports teams and fans and loyalty programs, especially in Europe with like football teams. There are people trying to nudge football teams again on things like that. I've heard
Nice.
about that recently.
Nice.
And then there are a lot of people in the music scene trying to do more again. And I hear more chatter happening these days, especially with the bull market. So I'm bullish on that. But one thing I think with NFTs is let's think bigger than the speculation for our next tipping point. Let's think about having DAOs of DAOs for NFTs. Let's think about having NFT VCs that fund apps that take things far further than the typical use cases. We need to get together more than ever to launch the next tipping point for NFTs is my little summary there.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, 100%. Every actor in the Web3 world has to kind of agree on the use case and see the value in it outside of just speculation, to your point. I think that's so important because Lord knows the speculation got crazy last bull run. We don't need to be like really overstating kind of the value, right? Like, let's just speak to the value for the creator and for the collector. That's it.
Exactly. Here's a quick illustrative example of how crazy it got. I was with my girlfriend at the time in California, and we were just like in the pool at the hotel with a bunch of people. And there was a dad talking to us, and he just goes, yeah, me and my son are retired now. And we were like, what do you mean you and your son are retired now? And he said, because his 16-year-old son bought a bunch of Bored Apes. They cashed out like half of them or more, and they just are living off of that money. So there was all kinds of stories happening like that. There's the double-edged sword. There's the people like just suddenly retiring and making their lives better, but there's the scams or the failures.
Or the Justin Biebers who bought in at $5 million for their ape.
And just to speak quickly to that, yes, we've had scams in crypto, right. But I think this also needs to be said in the context of everything we're saying. This is natural, and people forget in a nascent new industry for this to happen. And on top of the fact that, as we know, the media, both legacy and otherwise, needs to latch on to stories that are like sensational, like scams and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It often makes it seem like more than it is. We will get past this era where the scams feel like so much of a problem, and we will move towards more of a stable era, like where the internet is at large now. In other words, I believe Web3 will happen, and I believe we will be the dominant internet paradigm with NFTs and DAOs and everything else.
I love it. I love it. That's what we're here for. That's what the Web3 warriors are here for, and that's what the technology's here for, and it's not going anywhere. And that's one takeaway we can take from this week, that's for sure. No matter what social outcome comes, to your other earlier point that we kind of started the show off, the idea that, you know, not to get too Ready Player One about it, but no matter what happens in the real world, the digital world, and this technology is offering all kinds of new opportunities that people are just beginning to kind of understand. And it is so nascent, to your point, you know?
No, really well said. And just to add to that, because I think it's also important for anyone dissatisfied with the world now, with anything macro, with job opportunities, with politics, with social issues, there's never been a better time to DAOify something. I think that needs to be said now, with people thinking like, I don't like the way certain things are going in the world. DAOify now more than ever.
Let's go. Let's go. And I love your verbiage around the DAO. We're DAOing, we're DAOifying. Let's go. It's the real talk. That's what we're here for. So thank you so much for this time, Ian. Do you have any other final thoughts, any projects or things you want to share, what you're looking forward to around the corner? And I think we might need to touch base next year, because I'm really looking forward to all the stuff that you have happening in 2025, going cross-chain, having more rewards for your community, creating more opportunities for the DAO to get more involved at the governance level. So very cool stuff you got going on, and we might have to reconnect. But I'd love to hear any other projects you want to share before we wrap up here.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me here and for saying that. First of all, my answer is definitely. And to be more specific, let's talk after this episode. But late January is already an ideal time for that. So late January is potential. And then second, as far as links and things I want to shout out, just if you want to learn how to DAO, if you have any kind of experience or even no experience with DAOs, Push DAO is one of the most welcoming around. We're all kinds of different people just trying to get a protocol fully DAOified, doing what we can. So go to gov.push.org and just introduce yourself, and it's that easy, and we'll help you find your way into the DAO world. On top of that, if you're looking for information on our grants program, it's on Charmverse. You can just search Push DAO Charmverse, and then you'll find the grants program inside of there. There are also links elsewhere, including on our socials. Follow us on X at push_DAO. And then last but not least, if you like what I've been saying, my Twitter's expatcrypto3. My Telegram's the same, and I'm happy to talk to any of you listeners. I'm very open. I may only have 3,000 followers. I'm not a KOL, but I've met most of them in real life.
Oh, that's amazing. That's what's up. And yeah, I mean, I'm just under 3,000, I think, on the personal side. And we're growing out really, we're building out at the community level, right? And really focusing on grassroots. And it's these kind of conversations that we want to bring to our audience, because I think there's a huge amount of value and something like Push that is in this stage where they're at as a DAO and also as a protocol. I think that's a massive opportunity for people that really want to be part of something that is going to have an impact and going to be here for the long run in Web3. So definitely go check out push.org or check out the governance at gov.push.org. And thank you so much for your time, Ian. I really appreciate it. And we will definitely reconnect. And I'm going to be continuing to look at the DAOs and especially the charity and the loyalty programs of DAOs and how that kind of evolves. So really appreciate that. Thank you to all of our listeners and supporters out there. We appreciate you. We'll be back in a couple weeks. And until then, please take care, and we'll catch you in the metaverse.